Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we dig in deep to analyze the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, 1 minute at a time. I'm Andy Nelson from thenextreel.com. We are looking at Jon Favreau's 2008 film Iron Man, and joining me today is, again, a guest from The Next Reel. It is Steve Sarmento. Hello again, Steve.
Hey, Andy. Great to be back after a little hiatus here. Looking forward to getting back and talking about what's going on with Tony Stark.
Indeed, indeed. We are, of course, talking about Iron Man Minute 49. On today's show, the minute starts with Obadiah carefully repackaging his golden egg, and it ends with Pepper grimacing at the crazy Jim Cramer.
That crazy Jim Cramer.
Oh, my goodness. He's an interesting character, and it's interesting to see him in here. But before we get to him, we do have a little bit more of Obadiah and Tony. This is kind of the end of the conversation that they're having in front of the big arc reactor.
This is one of those challenges of the minute by minute when you come into like the tail end of a scene. I had to go back and get the context of the conversation because, yeah, we're right there at the tail end. But looking at this minute, Jeff Bridges, interesting casting of him and this, and it's one that when I first saw it, I thought, well, that's interesting. But as I'm, rewatching this again and getting this, I thought, he just, to me, just feels perfect in this role of... I don't really think of him as a bad guy, which I think lent itself to the casting on this one. But this, you just get that the greedy side of him that we start to see in this, as he's aware of this, Tony's new invention here. And you can just sort of see this like turn in him of we've gone from being the weapons company that doesn't sell weapons to, ooh, we've got something new and nobody else has this. And oh boy, what do I get to do with this new toy?
Yeah, the last minute we had with him, he really seemed eager to get a chance to see this thing and this whole arc reactor that Tony has created, this mini arc reactor that he'd heard about. And now he gets to see it. And obviously, he's very excited. And the way that he smiles and laughs, it's a great Jeff Bridges look.
Yes.
And then he's got that nice sigh that he does, that smile as he looks at Tony, puts his arm around him, that fatherly way.
Yeah.
And gives him that speech, which I think defines so much about kind of who he is as far as this businessman and this whole idea of we're a team. There's nothing we can't do if we stick together.
Right.
And that whole idea, plus the element, but next time you go do something like this, talk to me first.
Right.
The way that he kind of is coaching him right here, I like really well. And I like that there's that nod also to the father that, no more of this ready, fire, aim business. And I like how Tony looks at him and is like, oh, that's one of Dad's lines.
Yeah.
It's kind of that nice connection back to his father.
Yeah, it is. And it's, you see, Stane really, trying to be that surrogate father to Tony of, okay, you've got to keep me in the loop on these things. I've got to be involved in these. But yeah, the arm around, using Dad's line, he's definitely trying to build that relationship, that trusting relationship, since, Tony comes back and it wants to take everything in a different direction. It's like, I got to bring him in. I've got to keep him close so I know what's going on. And yeah, Jeff Bridges just perfect in this scene of taking that turn of, I've got to get Tony's trust. I can't have him making decisions like this. I need to know what he's doing so that he, at this point, as a businessman, he needs to know how to pivot the business. If Tony's going in a different direction, he's got to be ahead of the game on that. And to me, that's really, what he's trying to get Tony to understand, that it's for the better. It's better for all of them to be on the same page so that he can help coach and guide him through that transition of the company.
It's a great position for this guy who's always looking for an angle. And so It works really nicely. And it's interesting, especially as we find out later, kind of the turn that Obadiah is going to take in the film. So it's very interesting. Last time you were on, we did a little IMDb game with Terrence Howard, and I thought we would do one now for Jeff Bridges. You feeling up to it?
No. Oh, man, Jeff Bridges. You've got like 40 years of stuff.
I know.
Okay.
I know. He started as a kid working in projects with his dad back in the 50s, and he's still active today. So
okay.
So Jeff Bridges, the 4 films that IMDb says that he's known for, what would you say they are?
Big Lebowski.
Okay.
See, this is just insight into my mind. Because Because when I think of Jeff Bridges, I'm also, is that going to make it? Oh, gosh, see. Last Picture Show.
Okay.
Trying to think. Spanning the decades. King Kong.
Okay.
And I'm probably overlooking something really recent, but to me, Crazy Heart.
Okay.
I'm shooting 25%, aren't I?
You're actually at 50%. You got The Big Lebowski and Crazy Heart.
Okay.
I will give you a hint for the other two. Of the 7 films that he was nominated for an Academy Award for in either Best Actor or Best Supporting Actor, they were 2 of those.
Oh, I don't know his nominations. I don't have those off the top of my head.
Well, they were two films more recent than Crazy Heart, which was 2009.
Oh, I think Crazy Heart was that long ago. Time's going by fast as I'm getting old. I'm drawing a blank at this point. What am I missing and overlooking?
The other 2 films are True Grit.
Oh, yeah.
And Hell or High Water.
Really? Hell or High Water. Really?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I love that movie, but it's not one that that's where the algorithm goes a little wonky, I guess, because while I love that movie, I wouldn't say, oh, if you're thinking Jeff Bridges, that one's coming to mind, or that's a must-see performance that's going to be remembered. I think that film is overlooked and forgotten, and I appreciate that it's on the list, but it's not one that I think in a retrospective you're going to be like, we all remember him in Hell or High Water.
Although it was a Best Picture nominee, it got a lot of love that year. So but it's an but again, it's this crazy IMDb algorithm. How do they come up with these?
Nobody
knows?
Comes up with them. It's the internet taking over.
It's completely
it's
random.
Jarvis.
Right.
It's Jarvis. Yeah, it's Jarvis messing with
Jarvis,
us.
Right. So anyway, that's our little bit of Obadiah for this minute. Anything else with that little conversation before we jump into our next part of this scene?
No, like I said, we're sort of on the tail end of that conversation, and we've talked about the arc reactor. Previously they talk about the arc reactor, all of that. But yeah, to me, it's really this transition point in their relationship, which then leads us into, which is an interesting cut to make here. In this, where we jump. Yeah.
And this is something that Jon Favreau does a lot. And it's becoming clear to me as I rewatch this minute by minute that Jon Favreau really loves his transitions. He likes finding a way to have these fun pivots in his transitions. And in this particular case, we go from this line, with Obadiah talking to Tony about, I want you to promise me that you're going to lay low. And then it immediately cuts to Jim Cramer on his CNBC show Mad Money talking about Stark Industries and the craziness of Tony Stark. So it's a fun way to transition, and that Jon Favreau always seems to be looking for those opportunities.
Oh yeah, and we go from like a quiet moment to a really loud moment with Jim Cramer.
Yes.
So who's just loud and boisterous and obnoxious. And and it to me, the other piece is with, picking somebody like Jim Cramer, it really roots it into when you're able to cast somebody like that is a recognizable face from, for lack of a better term, the real world. It makes an interesting connection to things, because when you cast real news anchors or TV personalities like this, for me, it creates a different feel than just having some, character actor or somebody playing a part to convey information. This bridges the gap, I think, a little bit for us when you're able to get somebody like a Jim Cramer that is a known personality, and to find a way to weave that into your story, for me, just adds a little bonus. I think on the next reel, we've often talked about this is sort of like stunt casting, where you're putting somebody in there, but here he's playing himself, and to me it works just really well.
And it's typical Jim Cramer. I mean, I've never seen his show. I've never actually sat down and watched Mad Money, but I knew who he was. So he's clearly one of these characters that, he has a finance show, and he's just a crazy character who acts this way on his show. And you just never expected that type of personality to be on a finance show.
Right.
So it ended up creating quite a surprise hit with everything that Jim Cramer did, including the usage of his soundboard. And we get 3 examples of that here, where first it's the sell, sell, sell button that he pushes, and then it's the bear button that he pushes, and then the man out window button that he pushes. It's just very funny. If you look at, there's a web version of the soundboard where you can play all the buttons and hear all the different sounds. It's very funny to just go through it and hear all the crazy sounds that he has to use.
Oh my. Okay. So that's going to be a thing then. You're letting us have the soundboard. So Pete and I can start using this on shows, is what you're saying, is we can start using the Jim Cramer soundboard. You just unleashed the bear on that one by sharing that thing.
I think I did.
Pete, we're getting this
next
soundboard.
Time you talk about a movie that everybody hates, you can just hit sell.
Exactly.
That'll end the conversation.
Thank you for that bonus treat.
Well, according to the ticker, it does look like Stark Industries in this world is SIA. And as it looks, per the conversation that Tony was just having with Obadiah, as far as the price drop that their shares are going to have, it looks like it's trading at $82.25 now after dropping $56.50 per share. So
yeah, because I think
it was a hefty drop.
Yeah, well, Tony predicted 40. I think he's somewhere around 40. So he's it's interesting to find those little details where, in the conversation he has with Obadiah, it's like, yes, he's made a decision. It's going to have financial ramifications. But to see that sort of follow through just in a little detail, and the ticker to say, yeah, Tony predicted 40, and it's even a little bit worse than that, which is
right.
I love finding details like that in here.
Yeah. I also love the fact that the segment that Jim has on this moment is called Stark Raving Mad, which... It's great. You got a name like Tony Stark. Use it in any way you can.
Because, yes, when you're writing headlines or, those little titles, you've got to go for the bad puns, because that's just, it's so easy. But that is the reality of, if there's an awkward or pun to be made that's just ridiculous like this, yes, that's what you're going to see on TV. And I love that they take that, embrace it, and run with it.
Yeah, right. There is more information that we get on the screen. We see Pepper. She's watching this show, and she's got some great reactions to the things that Jim's saying on screen. And we do see that she is in a different corner of Tony's house than we had. Well, we have seen this room before. This is kind of the living room, but we're looking a direction we hadn't seen before. And behind her, we see this giant vase that looks ancient.
Yes.
There's also some slatted windows back there and a big floral arrangement. Actually, there's a couple floral arrangements in the scene now. And it looks like, if you look way in the back, it looks like there might be a doormat back in the area where there's the slatted windows, which makes me think maybe that's the direction where the front door is. It's really hard to tell because we never actually see anyone coming in or out of the front door. But it's, again, just it's a nice example of everything we see in Tony's house and exactly what he's got here. It's a great, great space to live in.
So are there... Because the internet loves detail and loves things, is there someplace out there that somebody has built out what the layout of Tony's house is? Because I imagine between this and Iron Man 2 and Iron Man 3, we get lots of different scenes in his house to see. Do we, I guess for lack of a better term, is Tony living in the hotel from The Shining where it's like this house does not logically make sense? Or is there enough to piece together, this is where these rooms are and the layout is logical? And if you left that room, yes, you would see that room from that angle. I'm just curious because I know fans love their details, and I didn't know if you had come across or considered finding the blueprints for the Stark residence.
One thing that I learned about people on the internet as I researched this is they really do love digging deep. There is a whole group of people who make miniature models of movie sets.
Okay.
And for, action figures and toys and things or not toys, but, like the nice fancy adult versions of some of these creations, where they will actually watch these scenes, scene by scene, and they will find every little clue and every little detail that they can to actually make scale model versions of these rooms so they can have these figures in them. And I think it was back when we were first in Tony's workshop that I was having this conversation with our guest and how it's, I didn't know that this universe of people existed.
So they
actually do this.
They're making little dioramas, finely detailed based on these scenes. Wow. Okay.
I came across it because I was trying to find one of the paintings in Tony's workshop.
Okay.
And it led me to this website where people were trying to figure out on their own what this painting was. And they were then showing pictures of their rooms that they had created. And I was like, wow, I did not know that people had gone this deep down this rabbit hole. Who would think to look that closely at these minutes of this movie? What crazy person would do that?
Andy Nelson.
Wait. Yes, indeed. So yes,
okay.
It is. So I wouldn't be. I didn't see anything of the first floor. I saw Tony's workshop,
of course,
but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody's also done the main part of the house.
Well, the workshop's more fun. This is There's only a few scenes I think up here in the main floor in this film, but yeah. So this is I don't know, like Pepper's in this room, which. It's not her office, so she's sort of hanging out, but she's watching TV.
Yeah,
just hanging out in Tony's house, I guess, waiting for whatever he's going to be doing. But yeah, I love the reaction shots. Just again keys us into the consequences of Tony's decision, and Pepper just sort of watching the chaos, the fallout of that. Yeah. She's aware of this is a business; it's got to be maintained. And she's looking at Jim Cramer, who is, in the public eye, a good barometer of how things are going. And clearly he's saying this is a company that's gone off the rails.
Right.
And she's watching it on of course, it's Tony Stark's house. So we've got big screen TV. And is she watching it on?
I think she's watching it
on a DVR.
She's watching it on the window. She's watching a DVR, but it's the way the windows are. So she's actually, if you look in the wide shot, which we get, or the wide of the TV shot, we can see that there's the ocean back behind it. So it's that window. Okay. But we do see on that, it's CNBC 145. She's got 25 minutes and 26 seconds remaining in the show. In LA, we've got a sunny high of 84, low of 62. It's 10:04 in the AM. Which is good to know. And also May 4th, 2008. This is an interesting thing that's, I think, worth talking about because, there's this recent Marvel book that just came out, Steve. I don't know if you're familiar with I think it's like 10 years of Marvel.
Oh, okay. No.
Marvel Studios, the first 10 years. This book just came out pretty recently. And in it, they actually give a timeline for all of the films to try to lay out like when these films took place to kind of clarify some of the things that may not line up quite as perfectly, trying to make it line up. And, retroactively doing so, inevitably, it's going to cause some issues and some things just aren't going to work and they aren't going to make sense. They now have placed Iron Man as taking place in 2010.
Ah, okay.
So obviously, this doesn't work so well when you have moments like this on screen where it actually says on screen 2008.
Which is the year the movie was released, 2008. So it would make sense at that time that we would set this movie not 2 years in the future, but right now. Yes.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So it's one of those little things that they go and they make these decisions. And again, it largely doesn't matter. It's not like the film comes out with information right at the beginning saying 2008. But you have these little details that the production team puts on screen, and all of a sudden it's like, that doesn't quite line up anymore.
Well, what's interesting about that May date is, according to IMDb, Iron Man was released on May 2nd, 2008. So having this, Pepper watching this May 4th, puts us really of like, hey, these events are happening right now, which I always find interesting when you have to consider production time. So you're shooting a movie in late 2006, early 2007, and having to make sure you're forward dating things. And then that also gets into issues. And there was a podcast I don't have it off the top of my head, but they were talking about props and production design people. And I think it was the Wes Anderson one, Grand Budapest. And she was talking about a calendar and that people were actually saying, oh no, in this year, this date was actually on a Thursday, not a Saturday or something like that. So she talked about when you have dates, you have to be very careful to consult your calendar, because if we think about this, May 4th, 2008, if the movie was released on a Friday the 2nd, this is a Sunday. If that's May 4th, was Jim Cramer's show actually, does he air shows on Sundays? You start to get into crazy details like this of, oh no, that would have been a weekend. That show wouldn't have been on. Types of arguments. So maybe maybe moving to 2010 would remedy that. Of course, you have to be cautious of, Jim Cramer Show existed in 2008. Fortunately, it still existed in 2010. If something had happened and the show had been canceled, we would have huge issues of definitely putting us in an entirely different universe where Jim Cramer Show still existed in 2010. But fortunately for us, I think he's still on the air.
It still works.
He's still on the air.
Is,
He's
right.
still working, yes.
He's still a busy boy, that Jim Cramer.
But that's the issue, I think, with like headlines on newspapers and dates and all of those things of the risk you take and picking a specific day and time for things.
Well, and it's become a much bigger issue nowadays when at the drop of a hat, you can just go, search the internet for May 4th, 2008, and it'll tell you what day of the week it was.
And I want to know the weather.
When we were growing up. Yeah, exactly.
Was it really a high of 84 on May 4th, 2008?
What was the weather? And before, you couldn't find that information so readily. I remember as a kid, it was a much bigger deal to know like the day you were born.
Yeah, what day of the week it was.
You'd have to like go back in calendars and try to figure out what day was that. And now it's like, you just Google it. It's like, I was born on a Wednesday. Who knew? There's an interesting deleted scene here that I think we should talk about. It would be really kind of a transitional scene between these two. It would be Tony coming home after his conversation with Obadiah, and then before the scene with Pepper watching Mad Money. This is a scene at night when Tony comes home, and it's a very kind of dark scene. It's kind of Tony's, I guess, reconnection with Jarvis, which is nice to see. But it's largely like Tony just kind of reconnecting with his life and getting a sense of what he's missed and, how many voicemails he has saved up, which is in the thousands, and he just deletes all of them. And, he has a watch, a gift of a watch there laying on his table from Obadiah. It says, Tony, thank God it wasn't your time, which is kind of an odd little note to get. And you just kind of get this quiet scene of Tony trying to figure out, how to get back into life, which I thought was a pretty interesting little moment. Again, not something that I felt like we needed, but it's a nice moment.
It does something to the pacing, though. It really slows things down.
Oh,
and I can see why this got taken out, because the sharp cut we have from that quiet moment with Tony and Obadiah to, the loud Jim Cramer. Yeah, this scene coming in between there, we do get, again, some more about Tony, deleting everything, he's starting new. But yeah, it just really slowed things down. And I think there's other ways we get that information about Tony. It's an interesting little minute and a half or so. But yeah, the tone just really slows things down. And between these two moments, it just would not have fit in there for me.
It does give us a clue, I think, way back toward the beginning of the film when we are first getting a sense of this room. We were trying to figure out as we were looking at it if this waterfall or this water feature in the room was actually there or if it was digitally added, because it didn't seem like something that was really there. But the sound that we hear here, I feel like, it was really a feature that they had put in on the set, because that's one thing with this deleted scene is like all you hear is this fountain.
Yes, because it sounds like somebody just sort of off camera reading Jarvis's lines. So when you look at sound for this, it's not the final sound mix. And if they haven't put in, Jarvis's voice, they probably wouldn't have put in, the water feature sound. So clearly it is something that's actually present there on location. Yes.
Yeah. I was surprised, though, that the scene got far enough clearly for them to add all the digital effects of all of the stuff that he's doing on the screen.
You don't see Tony just touching, empty glass, where they've actually placed in all of, we see what as he's deleting his email and scrolling through things that, yes, all that was placed there. I'm always curious about shooting those scenes of like, here, touch the glass like this. Does it matter? Are there specific, where are they sort of in production designed to say, you have to do it in this sequence? You've got to touch here. You've got to touch here. You've got to swipe here. Or if it's just touch some things and we'll figure it out later on what it looks like. Yes,
exactly.
Because I have to imagine, as always with films like this, with so much being placed later, interacting with things that don't exist and the challenges that poses for actors, with you've got to interact with a touchscreen that doesn't exist.
Yep. Right.
All right. I did some digging right here and found that on May 4th, 2008 in Los Angeles, California, the record high was 88, but the historic average high temperature was only 69 degrees. And On that day, actually, the high was 65 and the low was 57 degrees.
Oh, wow.
So
interesting.
They're portrayed clearly the Hollywood idealized version of LA, where it's always a high of 80 and a low of 60 and perfect weather for everyone.
Right.
Yes.
A little different, but oh well, what are you going to do? Nobody's paying attention to that information anyway.
Except for us.
Well, I don't have anything else for this minute. Do you have anything else?
No, because this is one where we end in the middle of Jim Cramer, right? He's in the middle of his rant. We see Pepper's reaction, and that's where we're going to leave it, I guess.
Do you want to come back and finish talking about Jim Cramer tomorrow?
I would love to talk more about Jim Cramer tomorrow.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining me again, Steve. Where can people find you online?
They can find me on Twitter at Mr_Steve23. And that's where I am tweeting out fun facts about movies, things that interest me. And that's probably the best place to find and interact with me. Of course, listeners here, can find me everywhere else on the next reel, but that's where I'm out there in the interwebs.
Awesome. Well, everybody, that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to the show for free at marvelmovieminute.com. Join us over in our Discord chat room and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Next Reel. And if you like what we do and you want to support us and get some cool stuff, become a patron over at patreon.com/thenextreel. Until next time, true believers.